Welcome to this group therapy volume 2 talk. My name is Felix Geen. I'm a music video director and I make video art. And I've been doing sort of video related stuff since about 2013, I suppose. This talk is going to be about how I got into making music videos, the kind of software that I use, and actually sort of breaking down a bit of the process behind my most recent music video I did for Squid, which is for their song Narrator. And I'm also just going to quickly touch on like some things I think are beneficial for people who want to get into the industry, and maybe a little bit about my background. So yeah, I'll just like quickly show some of my work on my website here. So yeah, here's the Squid video that I did. I'll just like quickly scrub you guys through it so you can see. So the video was kind of about this idea of like world building and using like 3D models to create a scene around the band. It's a 8.5 minute long video, so maybe we won't watch the whole thing right now, but you can always go and check it out on my website, which is felixgeen.com. I've been making, as I said, music videos for a few years now, and most of these works are things I've done in collaboration. And I think that like one of the main things I would say from like my experience in working in video and also trying to get into video is just like it's all about the connection you make and the people that you meet along the way, because you can be like an amazing artist and you can be making like some of the best work, but if you don't have like people around you who are doing work with you and who like know what you do, then you're going to really struggle to like find work basically. I owe a lot of what I have to people who have offered me opportunities along the way. Nepotism really, I think, is how you tend to get work in my experience. And like coming up to when I went freelance, I had already started to build a kind of, I guess like a client base, but really more like a sort of friendship basis relationship with some people. So I had contacted a director called Charlotte Rutherford, who I'd met when I was at university, and I just said to her, like, you know, I really like the work you're doing. I think the videos you're making are great, and I would love to be like doing some visual effects on your videos, and you know, like combining our skill sets, because she had a really strong background in directing already and done quite a few. She was already really into photography, and she'd done quite a few music videos. So we just sort of like teamed up, and it went really well from there. And we still work together today. I feel like that relationship gave me so many opportunities, because every time I would do a video with her, although that like at the beginning I wasn't really getting paid much at all, like one of the jobs I did was, I think I got £300, and it took me about 3 months to complete. There was a lot of comping, and the video actually never came out, which was terrible, because I had spent all this time on it, and I was sort of thinking this was going to be like my breakthrough piece I could release, but it was all for an artist who ended up folding and is no longer an artist anymore, no longer a musician anymore, and their face was all over the video, so I couldn't even really show the video. I had to like blur their face out and put it in my show reel. So yeah, but I think that I guess the lesson there is just that like I sort of really worked quite closely with Charlotte, and you know, we put a lot of trust in each other, I suppose, and that led to some really good projects in the future. And I learned a lot of things about production from those experiences. So yeah, this music video for Avalon Emerson, One More Fluorescent Rush, this was actually directed by a friend of mine called Hayden Martin, and I worked on it alongside him and Joshua Eiffel. And I met Joshua Eiffel first. I met him through a friend of mine who I was doing a music video for free, basically. My friend called Fred, whose alias is Greenwood Sharps. He's a producer, and I was working on a music video for him that lasted a very, very long time. I think we were working on it together for about 3 months. And it was probably the first music video I ever did, actually. And working with Fred, he was like, you know, you've got to meet my friend Josh. You guys are gonna really get on. Like, you have a really similar style, and you know, I think you guys would get on really well. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And then I moved to London, and I met up with Josh in a pub, and he was just like immediately like, so do you want to do a project together? And I was just like, yeah, man, that sounds great. I mean, maybe I've got some time in like a month or something. I'm quite busy right now. And he was like, nah, man, we got to get this project done like tomorrow. Like it's the deadline's tomorrow. And I was like, okay, let's go. And like we worked in this music video together very, very quickly, and like got it out, and yeah, made some visuals for that. And just off the back of that, he was like, oh, my friend Hayden Hayden Martin's going to be making this music video for Avalon Emerson. And I was a huge fan of Avalon Emerson's, and obviously I was like, oh, I would love to be involved. And so yeah, that was basically how I got onto making this music video, which was like for me the best thing I'd ever done. Like, really like inspired me a lot to be working on like something with this kind of art style that I'd never really seen before. My actual role in the video was mainly just walking around the gardens and 3D scanning plants, and sort of 3D scanning these big sort of ferns and things. And you can see some of my 3D scans here. They sort of popping up in the background there. And I like processed these scans and then sent them to Hayden, and he integrated them into the edit and everything. So yeah, that was a really great project. And yeah, it's just another one of those examples where making friends and then doing things just for free and for fun, and just taking as many opportunities as you can get really just pays off. And I think it's something that I still do today. I still work on projects with people and with friends that aren't like money focused, because I know that those things are going to in the future bring me some money. I know that sounds like a really privileged position to be coming from, to be saying, oh, you know, do work for free, but like not everyone can do work for free. And I also couldn't do work for free at the beginning. I was lucky enough to be able to live at home with my mum for a long time when I finished university. But you know, I had to spend like, when I finally got my first job, which took a really long time, at this events company doing PowerPoint and stuff, you know, I was doing that for 2.5 years and just saving money the whole time. And in my spare time, like working on my own projects and my own things. So I was sort of like working my 9 to 5 and get the money to sort of like pursue these projects and, you know, invest in computer and stuff that I could work with. I guess that's something else I probably should touch on, is just like hardware. I get that question quite often from people about what kind of hardware you want to be buying, like what kind of computer you need to be doing this kind of work. I mean, I've always used Windows my whole life, basically. I mean, I've had Macs. I had a Macintosh at university, a MacBook that wasn't very good for doing what I wanted to be doing on it. Like, I think Macs are generally very expensive to get ones that are powerful enough to do the kind of 3D stuff with. Like, I think that's changing right now, but it's still the case. I would still recommend to people, if they're on a budget and they want to save some money, to invest in a Windows-based system. So like, you can find pretty well-priced like PC systems on places like PCSpecialist.co.uk. These guys, and I actually bought a second-hand one of their laptops for about half the price of what it was worth. But yeah, you can buy one new if you want to, but I also really recommend, you know, maybe doing a bit of research into the kind of laptop you want, and maybe getting one that's just slightly older than like, you know, maybe not getting like a 2021 laptop, but just getting like a 2019 top spec laptop, because you'll find that like you're saving about £500 to £1,000, and you're still getting some really powerful hardware that was good 2 years ago and is now like still really good. And you know, the other good thing about buying like secondhand or like top spec hardware is that people who buy a really top spec laptop tend to look after it and tend to sort of treat it really well. So you end up buying a secondhand piece of kit that's like depreciated a lot in value, but is still being really well looked after. And yeah, that just means you're kind of getting quite a good deal. And I still invest a lot in secondhand hardware. Like, I like to sort of reuse things, and I think that's a really good way of saving money as well. But yeah, I think if you're really looking into getting a computer to do visual effects work on, you need to kind of work out exactly what it is you want to be doing. And I guess that's something I'm going to touch on a little bit now. It's just like talking a bit about software that I use. So to make this Squid video that I was showing you earlier, I was using mainly for doing the 3D stuff. I was using Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D is a piece of software by Maxon, and it's just a very like simplistic but quite powerful piece of 3D software. It is obviously like a paid for package. It's not free, but it does have some subscription models that aren't super expensive. You could also look into using Blender. I know a lot of people use Blender, and Blender is a really powerful piece of software as well. You can get it for free on, I guess, you can get it for free on blender.org. I don't really use Blender, so I can't really like do much of a tutorial or explanation on this software, but I know there's lots of tutorials out there, and it's really like a well-respected and well-known piece of software. So that's a big looking to get a free piece of software to do 3D in. I also used mainly Adobe After Effects for the compositing and for the keying. I wouldn't say After Effects is perfect by any means, and I do have a lot of struggles with it, and I find myself wishing I was software, but it's just so many possibilities within the software and so many plugins and tools that you can use within the software that I think it's one of those things that it's an easy way of getting your head around visual effects. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how I cut the background out, which is called keying. So here we are inside After Effects. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about all the different parts of the software, but quite basically, this is your project panel where you can bring in footage and images and things. And then here you have like your effects controls panel where you can apply effects to that footage. And here you have your composition window where you look at your composition and you can view what you're doing. Over here we have lots of panels for like finding certain effects. You can search for effects in here. And at the very bottom is the most important bit probably, which is the timeline. So this is where you would... So I'm going to show you this shot that I took from the Squid music video. So I've imported the footage. If I double click on it, I can look at it. So you can see that we were shooting on this hockey pitch, using it as a green screen. The idea for this video was really just something I thought of one day when I was walking along, and I looked at like a tennis court, and I saw that the ground was green. And I had just recently bought a drone, and I just thought it would be an interesting idea to try using a drone as a way of getting above the horizon line, so you could look down on a subject. And like here's a shot of the drone as it landed on the floor when it ran out of battery. So you can sort of see like the horizon line and all these things above it. So it's not really working at that point. But as soon as you get the camera up at a certain height, like above that horizon line, you start to be able to separate the subject from their background. So we were able to be really creative with this and like move the camera around in a big orbit and constantly keep it moving, which when you're on a green screen studio, like a normal green screen set, it's very hard to find 360 degree green screen studios. And there's lots of problems that go along with those things as well, because when you're shooting on green, you have all this green like bounce light going everywhere. So often you'll see like the green reflects up onto objects and it gives them all this kind of green hue where you have to sort of remove that. And when you're shooting in a green screen studio, that's even worse because it's all over the walls, and that means that all the light is just bouncing around and just reflecting off everything. This green light's going everywhere. So it's quite rare to be able to have a huge green floor. It's kind of a cheap way of getting like a large green screen space. I was a little bit concerned with the shadows because I was really hoping for a cloudy day where there would be like no shadows. When you have like a really overcast day, you don't really get much long shadows. You just get these kind of contact shadows. But yeah, I mean, as you'll see, like the footage does key okay. It's not perfect, but it's okay. So I'll just show you how a basic key would be set up in After Effects, and I'll just try and talk you through like how I went about keying this. So first thing, I'm going to right click on my footage and go new composition from selection. And what that does is it creates this little comp, which is basically like a small project or a small, sort of folder of shots or whatever however you want to think about it. But it's called a composition. So inside the composition, we now have this footage, and we can now start applying effects to this footage. So we're looking to make a green screen color key. So in the effects browser up here, I'm going to type in key, and we've got a few options of different ways we can key this footage, but the one I always use is this thing called key light. So with key light selected, we're just going to choose a green on the ground here. So I'm just going to take the little color picker and just color pick from a bit of the green here, and you can immediately see we've got rid of the background. It's been replaced by this black, and the reason we're getting black is because our composition, if we go into our composition settings, we can see that our background color is black. So we could set that to red, or we could set it to whatever color we want, just to preview the background. I'm going to just put it to white, I think, because I think white's going to be helpful for this to see our shadows, and press OK. And you can see already there's quite a few problems. Like there's a lot of noise, kind of just like not very nice artifacts, like everything looks very washed out and very muddy. And we're not really, this is like not a very nice result that we're getting here. And we definitely need to tweak it a little bit, but it is the basics of the key, which is good. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to where it says final result here and just set this to intermediate result. And immediately you see like we get a little more green coming back in to our shadows and to places that are receiving light, but that's okay. We don't mind that. It's fine for now. So what I'm going to do is just leave it on intermediate result, and under where it says screen matte here, I'm going to try crunching these values, like the clip black and the clip white. And what this is going to do is basically start to put, as I adjust the clip white and move it up, you'll see we start to like lose some of the ground noise and ground details, which is kind of what we want, because we don't really want to have all these speckly, noisy bits on the ground. And if I adjust clip white, you see the opposite happens. We start to get darker shadows, and we also start to bring back certain bits that are lost. So if I zoom in here on the jacket, if I put that back to 100, you'll see that we're actually losing quite a lot of the jacket to the green spill. But if I bring this number down from 100, we get the jacket back, and it's a bit of a better result. So next thing is I want to try and address some of this noise, and a lot of the problems we're getting with the edges here are to do with camera compression and noise. One thing we can do to fix this is adding another effect. So I'm going to just hide the key light for a second and go back to looking at the shot as it was. And I'm going to grab a reduce noise. And this is a plugin that's actually, it's a paid for plugin, so it doesn't come with After Effects, but it's a really good plugin for getting rid of grain and noise in your footage. I'm just going to press the adjust button here. And inside this reduce noise panel, I'm just going to click auto profile. So it's found us a little patch of noise, which has actually got quite a lot of texture in it, which could cause us some problems. But let's see what happens when we press apply. So it hasn't done a huge amount, but you can see if we turn it on and off, you maybe can't see this exactly, but it's removed a lot of the like compression artifacting we were getting. It's kind of like smoothed things out a lot. And if I go and apply the key light again now, you'll see that the result is a bit smoother. So that's with the reduced noise turned off, and that's with the reduced noise turned on. And you'll just notice that our shadows are now smoothed out. They look a lot more, just a lot more like less chunky. They've got these macro blocking artifacts in them. Just looks a lot better really. And it hasn't really given us any really major bad things. Like it's kind of just fixed a lot of the noise and the grain. And I'm going to put on the transparent background just so we can see what that looks like. And you can see we're still getting some holes in here in our white drum kit. So I'm going to have to bring down the clip white a bit further until we can get that back again. So around there. So that gives us a pretty basic key, and it's a good starting point for us to move forward with the rest of the visual effects shots. I wanted to just quickly touch on color correction, because obviously you can see the band members are really dark. Like they look they look like they're in a lot of shadow. And you can fix that by using a Lumetri color. So I just applied a Lumetri color over here. And in there you can make lots of adjustments to the exposure values of the image. So I tend to boost the exposure a little bit on this shot just to get a bit more back in the highlights and in the shadows. And then also if you want to just try and boost the shadows up, you can adjust that here with the shadows slider. So we can immediately start to get back more shadows. And after tweaking these values for a bit and changing the contrast and highlights and shadows and turning the saturation up, you get to a point where you're maybe a bit happier with the overall look of the footage and how it balances. And this is always going to be dependent on the shot, so it's not very helpful just going through and showing you these values being tweaked. But the last thing you do on a shot with green screen, it tends to be removing all this green spill that we can see in the shadows here. Like you can see that the shadows are full of green, and you don't really notice it so much, but you do when it's composited onto another image. But there's a lot of green in the image, and the way to get rid of that, I use an effect called Advanced Spill Suppressor. So with Advanced Spill Suppressor, you put that at the very bottom after your Lumetri. And here you can choose basically it just sort of removes the green channel basically, which is not great for your skin tones because skin does have a little bit of green in it. But you can see here with the effect turned off, you can see quite a lot of green. Especially like in the shadows and in the whites, but with it turned on, it's all gone away. And it just helps to make the image feel a bit warmer and less green. So the next thing I want to do is just jump into another piece of software called Synthesize and talk you through the second part of this process of integration, which is the camera tracking. So I'm just going to load up the first 150 frames of that video clip we're looking at in After Effects. So here inside Synthesize, we can begin to start camera tracking this video. And what that basically means is the software is going to analyze the footage and place a lot of points and try and calculate what the camera was doing in the scene. So we can try and let it do that itself by just running the auto tracker, or we can go and add some manual trackers ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all add some manual trackers, and then I'm going to try and let the software do its own solve after I've given it some clues. So under the trackers panel, I'm just going to drop down this little create tracker button. I'm just going to find some points that I think will be good for tracking. So I think this little dot here looks quite good because it's very visible and it's very it's consistent. It does disappear, but it doesn't disappear for very long. I'm going to drag my tracker down so that it's nice and small and just lock it into place on there. And then I'm going to set my perspective to follow 2D. So I'm going to follow it as I track forward, and I just press spacebar and it starts tracking. So you can see there, I tracked that little dot quite well. So now I'm going to just lock the tracker and move on and do another one. I'm going to try tracking this one over here. So lock into that one, track forward, and you can see it went out of the screen there, so we lost it, but that's fine. We got it for a little bit, so I'll lock that track again. I'm going to do this little dot down here, or maybe I'll try and do one that doesn't leave the screen. Like this one over here looks quite good, because it stays, I think it's going to stay in shot. So I'll track that one, and lock, and maybe I'll try and do one that's a bit closer over here. So I'll track that way. That one goes out of shot as well, but it's okay. And is that a little speck there? I find specks are really easy to track because the tracker likes them. They always lock in quite well, and you can get you can always find a little speck of something on your green screen to track. I put in these little square tracking markers, but at the end of the day, they're not really that useful because the tracking software doesn't really understand them as well as just a little dot on the floor. So I think dots are these little dots or specks are kind of the way to go if you want good tracking markers. If you're trying to do visual effects supervising or something on set and you want to get some good tracking markers down, I recommend these little specks, even just a really small speck like this one. I can try and track it and see how it goes. It locks in pretty well, and you can, it's so tiny that it's not even really noticeable, but it's really good for the tracker. So yeah, we've gone and tracked a couple of points now on the footage. So I'm going to try and go for an auto solve on this and see how the software gets on. So I'm just going to open up this panel here, and I'm going to click on the big auto button. come up with a solution. So it says solve the scene, and you can see it's added a bunch more trackers all over the scene, and we can see that it's given us some decent trackers. Like, it's got a few that are maybe a little bit wobbly and some of them that aren't so great. And we can already see that's this little camera over here, and you can see if we scrub, if we move the timeline, if I press play, you can see that it's given us a kind of, it's basically worked out what it thinks the camera is doing. And that's based on all these little points everywhere. It's kind of calculated what it thinks the camera did in this moment. And we can make it better by adding calculation for lens distortion, because the lens we're shooting on, you can see here, this white line has quite a big bend in it, which tells me that the lens has distortion, has sort of barrel distortion. So we need to click calculate distortion here, and I'm going to go in and add some cubic distortion as well. I know it has these two parameters, this lens. So with that ticked, we can go to refine and refine the solve, and now the camera is getting a bit better. One thing we can do to improve this is actually just to get rid of some of these trackers that are probably not doing a whole lot of good, because some of these trackers that it's added will be helping us, but some of them will probably be causing problems. It's hard to see like off just as are, but the software has a little thing called cleanup trackers here, which can be really helpful in just automatically cleaning up some problems. So if I click bad, just allow it to go through and fix these. It's going to try and fix bad frames, trackers that are far away, high error trackers, and it's going to sort of get rid of a few points. So you can see after I clicked fix, it removed a few. And if I go and refine again, we're now getting down to a super low HPIX value of 0.5. And 0.5 is pretty good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to set up a ground plane for us, because you can see right now, if I zoom out, all the points of the floor that it's found, all these points all over the floor, it thinks that they're kind of at a weird angle. It's not getting the ground plane properly. So just to make this visualization easier for us to see, I can set up a coordinate system that will lock the ground plane onto the floor. So under the coordinates tab, I'm going to click on this thing called 3-point. It's basically a 3-point coordinates definition tool. So I click this, it asks me to enter an origin. I'm just going to choose this is my origin here, and then it wants another point, the second point. I'm going to choose this one here, and the third point I'm going to choose this one here, and I'm going to go apply coordinate system, yes. So now all our points are sitting on the floor, apart from these ones that are probably sitting on the amplifier or the keyboard. They're a bit higher up on the ground, but the rest of them are all basically sitting on the ground, which is perfect. And we can view this in a few different ways. Like one thing I really like to see is how it looks with in perspective mode. We can like view the camera moving around the scene, which is really cool. You can sort of see like the camera path, what it thinks the camera path is doing, and you can sort of check it for bumps and errors there. And you can also lock the camera to what the original view was. So here you can see what it looks like with the grid applied on the ground, which is really helpful for seeing how well the grid is locked to the ground and if it's sliding at all. And if we were to combine it with what we've done in After Effects, we would then have like our footage keyed with the invisible background, and we'd have our camera track ready. And if we brought those two things together into Cinema 4D or another package like Blender, for example, we could then start to place 3D objects around on the ground around them, and they would always sit on top of those objects or behind them, depending on how you composited those two images together. But you can get an idea for the sort of fundamentals behind the effect that we created for this video. So yeah, that's the end of my talk. I think I can't really go into much more detail without becoming really boring or take too much time. So yeah, thank you for watching.